because I think he was out back on that boat. I think he was done. I think he
Oh,
was just like, oh well,
yeah.
I screwed
I,
up.
I
I'm
messed
gonna
up.
go tell stories about it, and that's where a lot of men find themselves. They give up.
Hold of me, I'm sinking. Father, this world is just too much on my own.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining Jonathan Lewis and myself, Jeff Watson, once again on the Fathers for Fathers podcast. Today, we're talking to Willie Robertson from the hit show and brand Duck Dynasty. Who doesn't know Duck Dynasty? You know Duck Dynasty, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on, who doesn't? This is
We
like
even know it up in Canada.
that's right. That's right. We
Yeah.
hunt ducks up in Canada, even. There's a new movie that the Robertson family has produced titled The Blind that chronicles the story of Phil and Kay Robertson, who are the matriarch and patriarch of the family. This movie is about overcoming. It's about the power of family. It's about addiction. And most importantly, it's about the redemptive power that is found in a personal relationship with Jesus. We don't want to waste any time here, Jonathan. You got a question that's burning on you. I could tell you.
Well,
Let,
apart from the ribbing we were doing about each other's beards before we got started, to which Willie suggested that I don't have a beard, I'll jump in and just get in on the addiction, man. I mean, addiction's often a deep and personal battle that families got to endure and make their way through. And just in the last 24 hours, I've had two conversations and prayed with couples that are battling with different types of addictions, Willie. And I know this is something that is a big part of your family's testimony and overcoming. And I just wondering if you could share with us how faith and spirituality and your faith as a family and your value that you guys put on family have helped you guys get through and some of the difficult obstacles you've had to face.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to fill the void with something else, and so that's kind of what um, the blind's at that point where Phil is super lost and misguided and addicted and everything else you could possibly be that's bad, and so the movie is the portrayal of where they come out of that and then where he actually finds his faith. It pretty much destroyed everything that was around him. It kicked us out of the house, and so it's about Phil and him finding that faith. But I think the bigger person is Kay, who was able to forgive and
Yeah.
keep the family together, because he could have found Phil could have found his way, but she could have just said adios, and if
Yeah.
that happens, my whole life looks completely different. I mean, there's no Duck Commander, there's no Duck Dynasty. I'm not talking with you guys now. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
really every hour by hour that I live my life, I'm like, this is all because I can trace it back. And I actually
Yeah.
just wrote a book called Gospeller, where it's about sharing your faith with others. And I start with that first chapter is about them, just because that it moved on me so much about their story, and just to think like, if we thought that way with other people, I think there's people we go on like, oh, there's no way they could, they're so bad. In fact, that's the people we try to avoid, and Phil would have been that person. But
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
went up there to
oh,
talk to him, and it was that preacher who went up to in that bar to talk to him, and because he was being shoved by Phil's sister, who was Aunt Jan, and who's passed away now. But the movie was a legacy to her as well, to never give up on her brother. And she said, if you convert Phil, he'll convert thousands.
wow.
How she knew that, or where that came from? Because how would you know? Like, this is a terrible guy running a bar. He's not, but she saw that, which is exactly what happened. And so, yeah, all those things came together, and we just were like, we've got to show this. One, just out of the appreciation that had this not happened, none of the rest of this would have happened. I did, even as I thought, like, everything since, if you take the TV show, the movie, the podcast, the books, like tons of books that, none of, you're talking about hundreds of millions of people exposed to some light of the gospel in some way, even if it's a prayer at the end of the show. And I can trace all that back to one little couple with three little boys in South Arkansas with no money, no fame, no any of this, um, and it's just crazy what God can do,
Yeah.
and the whole new lease on life that they would have, like, yeah, because I think sometimes we're like, oh well, my life's over, pretty much I've ruined it or I blew it. Or Doug Dynasty didn't start till Phil McKay was 65 years old. Like, think about that. Like, they're pretty much like, well, we did it. Uh, and then there's this whole new thing, and then I mean, Phil just came out with a new book like last week, like, and he's 77 years old, a new book that he's so it's just amazing. So hopefully that watching the movie will inspire no matter where you're at, even if you're on the wrong side of it, then you're like, hey, I can turn my life around and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And it's not like prosperity. It's not like, oh, God's going to give us all this. It's not that. It's even if it would have just kept our family together, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Back when we were just fishing on the river in the 80s, we didn't have no money. We was poor as heck, but we were as happy as we could be. It was like, life is great. We get to grow our beards out and, have fun and fish. And, it was like, we were like, we made it,
Totally.
beards out, not like those ones y'all got. Like,
Willie, I got
even a beard. It's okay. You can call it what it is. That's just a bit of scrub.
I got a question for you, man. So, I mean, when you think about, like, you hit on an important topic, like when you mentioned forgiveness, like, we're a ministry that goes after men, and, we want to be fishers of men. And, when you think about forgiveness is a sweet, sweet wine only drunken by the brave, like, it's so hard to forgive sometimes. And I feel like forgiveness is at the heart of a lot of familial trouble, like it's the saving grace. Can you speak a little bit about forgiveness? Even, the family's narrative like this. I feel like there's a huge theme of forgiveness in this movie. Like, and I think a lot of men need to hear about forgiveness. They're begging for it. They need it. They got to forgive. They need to be forgiven. It's like it's a huge thing.
Well, yeah. And you have to, well, it's the huge theme of the New Testament. Like, that's what it's all about. You have to forgive yourself as well. And so, it can hold back everything without forgiveness because it just keeps you stuck. And so I like to think, so think about Peter. So Peter, does this, the only thing we know is Jesus said, hey, come follow me and I'll make you a fisher of men. And he drops everything he's got and takes off, which is so, to me, heroic. I'm like, wow, who does that, And then he follows Jesus along, and then Jesus says, you're going to blow it. And he's like, I ain't going to blow it. I'll never blow it. So he actually called it out, which was even worse. And he wouldn't. And then he blows it, and denies knowing even who Jesus is, which I always say, like, it'd be like if you're a guy and you're like, if somebody asks were you married, and you're like, no, I'm not married. It'd be like you saying you don't even know your wife. Like, I don't even know who that is. I mean, I would be a marriage counselor for 10 years if that happened. And so, like, but here we find Peter. And so then when Jesus comes back at the end of John, he goes to talk to Peter. Because I felt like they were going to have to deal with this. And, he famously asked him 3 questions, do you love me? Do you love me? And then we see when the book of Acts cranks up, in chapter 1, who's up there organizing the whole group? Peter. Like, he's moved on. He knows, hey, I'm good with Jesus. I've been forgiven. He forgives himself. Because I think he was out back on that boat. I think he was done. I think he was just like, oh, well, I screwed up.
I messed up.
Tell stories about it. And that's where a lot of men find themselves. They give up, and they're like, I'm done with this. But no, he says, no, feed my sheep, get out there. And so then we see Peter, and nobody else questioned him, which was amazing. Nobody said, hey, who made you the leader of this outfit? You're the one who just denied Jesus. And then who gets up in Acts chapter 2? Peter. Boom. Then 3,000. So, and then we just see that. And so I think the story of the blind is much like the story of Acts and Peter and Paul, these other people that we're reading about, which we're screwed up people, we've made mistakes, but there is forgiveness, and we get back up and get back in the race, And so I see a lot of men just basically throwing in the towel, just saying, I'm out, because I'm I'm screwed up, or you're identifying yourself by these sinful things, you're like, I'm a this,
Yeah.
I'm a that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm a child of God and I'm known by God, and I'm, the past is the past and you move on. And so I just don't, and then I'm going to hopefully be known by something different, like Phil Robertson is not known by what was pre the blind, but if you told him at that point, probably everybody around him says, you're always going to be known like this, right?
Yeah.
Now we
Yeah.
go fast forward this much time later, and that's the last thing people didn't even know the story,
Yeah, no, exactly. I know we have a short amount of time with you, Willie, and I appreciate you taking the time with us because we're just a budding ministry that just launched in November, and we're already making a lot of tracks. And I've led 4 guys to Christ in the last 3 weeks and seen a couple get baptized, and it's pretty awesome. But when you talked about identity, just to finish up, I think about Romans 8 and knowing our identity in Christ. And if you forgive yourself, well, then God doesn't see Phil or Willie or Jonathan or Jeff. He sees Jesus in front of us, Jesus in us, Jesus behind us. And I just really appreciate you like cutting right into that story with Peter, because that's who God saw after that. He saw Jesus in Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He saw it before.
I know. Amen.
That's what's
Amen.
amazing, and that's why we have to forgive, because I think when we don't, we're basically stealing that away from what Jesus did for us. And so for us to hold on to that, and really to hold on to any of it. And so we've all been forgiven, and we all need forgiveness, and but I think God needs bold men to be bold and to share, to tell that story. This was a version of us telling the gospel. So this is a version of 1 Corinthians 15. I'm not where the gospel is of first importance, and this where he says, which you take your stand on. And so this is us taking our stand. And I think I can sit there and just think of tons of creative ways to do that. And what about a movie? What about a movie where I don't have to haul somebody to a church building? I don't have to tell a guy they need to go to marriage counseling. They may need to do all that.
Yeah.
How about I can get them to see a movie, And so what a sneaky way. I'm like, oh,
I love it, man.
Then we start thinking of ways to be like, this is how we can get the gospel. At least create the thought. At least create that, like, hey, man, I don't know if my life's right. And so movies and TV, like, those are 2 great areas. We see the world just use them to death, for all the wrong reasons in so many ways. So that's why we wanted to get in there and be that light, be that light that offers that. We're not the only ones for sure, but that's just another way to get the gospel message out there.
It's modern Roman roads, and you guys are hammering them for the gospel, and I love it. I just want to thank you for taking the time. I know how busy you are, and it's a real blessing that you would reach out to the guys that we're reaching out to through this podcast. So thank you, Willie.
I'm glad I reached out.
Yeah, man. Well,
hey, I was so tempted to say, come on, when you were like heating up with Peter, but I thought, no, I won't interrupt him.
Come on, let's go.
Come on. All right, man.
Great talking to you guys.
All right, God bless you.
Hold me, I'm sinking, Father, this world is just too much on my